We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house. Those were my daughter's words, calm, casual, as if she were talking about returning a dress that didn't fit. But I just stood there, frozen in the middle of my kitchen, holding a dish towel that suddenly felt heavy in my hands. I looked at her, my own flesh and blood, the same little girl who used to chase seagulls on that very beach, her laughter echoing over the waves. And now she was telling me that the place holding every memory of our lives together was gone. The way she said it, no hesitation, no flicker of guilt, it was like a gust of cold air had swept through my chest and left me hollow. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard her right. My ears rang, the refrigerator hummed in the background, and I swear I could hear my own heartbeat. "What did you just say?" I whispered, not daring to believe her words. She sighed, shifting her phone from one hand to the other. "Mom, please don't start. It's done. We're leaving tomorrow. You'll be more comfortable with me and Daniel anyway." More comfortable. That's what she called it. I pressed my hand against the countertop to steady myself. The granite was cool beneath my palm, the only thing that felt real in that moment. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Why would you sell it? Without telling me? How could you even do that? But before any of them could form, she turned away, scrolling on her phone like the conversation was over. And that's when I realized she wasn't just telling me news. She was giving me an order. The house, my house, was gone. Before that day, life was peaceful, in the quiet way that retirement often is. I spent my mornings sitting on the porch of my beach house, watching the tide roll in. The gulls would swoop low, and the smell of salt and coffee filled the air. That house was more than wooden walls, it was the first thing I ever truly owned in my own name. After my husband, Leonard, passed away, I'd taken what little insurance money we had and bought it outright. It was small, a little weathered, but it was mine. Every chipped paint corner, every creaky stair held a piece of my independence. My daughter, Teresa, used to love it here. She'd visit with her husband, Daniel, a tall man with perfect manners and a smile that never reached his eyes. They'd sit on the deck, sipping wine, pretending to enjoy the sunset while they scrolled through their phones. Still, I was happy just to have them near. I'd bake Teresa's favorite lemon bars, and she'd hug me absent-mindedly, one of those light, distracted hugs that last a second too short. But I told myself it was enough. Because that's what mothers do, we tell ourselves that scraps of love are still love. Then, about a year ago, things started to shift. Teresa began talking more about practical decisions, about how keeping a property this big wasn't sustainable, about downsizing and planning for the future. At first, I thought she was worried about me. I smiled and told her I was fine, that the sea air was good for me, that I walked every morning, that the neighbors checked in. But she'd always end the conversation with that same sentence. "Mom, you can't live alone forever." It was meant to sound caring, but there was something rehearsed about it, a line spoken from obligation, not concern. Still, I brushed it off. That's what we do when we love someone. We give them the benefit of the doubt, even when the truth is whispering beneath the surface. The last normal evening I remember was 2 weeks before she told me the house was gone. The sunset was breathtaking that night, streaks of gold and crimson spreading across the sky. I was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea when I heard her car pull into the driveway. She came out with her usual energy, that confident, city woman stride that used to make me so proud. But behind her sunglasses, I could sense something tight in her smile. "Hey, Mom," she said, giving me that short hug again. "How've you been?" "I'm good, baby. Just made some sweet tea. Want some?" She hesitated, glancing toward her phone again. "Sure, maybe later." "Listen, there's something I need to talk to you about." My stomach tightened. That's the thing about mothers, we know. We always know when a sentence begins like that. She sat across from me, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. "Mom, you've been living here for, 15 years now? Don't you ever think about, I don't know, moving somewhere easier? Closer to me and Daniel?" I laughed softly, trying to lighten the air. "Teresa, this is easy. The ocean's my backyard, and my neighbors bring me gumbo every Sunday. I've got all I need." But her expression didn't change. "You could have so much more if you sold this place. It's valuable, Mom. You don't even realize." I smiled at her, that patient, motherly smile, and said, "Honey, not everything worth keeping comes with a price tag." She looked away then, pretending to admire the sea, but I caught the flicker of irritation in her jaw. That's when I knew she wasn't talking for me. She was talking at me. The first sign that something was wrong came one rainy morning. I remember it clearly, the kind of gray coastal rain that makes everything smell like wet salt and wood. I was sitting by the window, sipping tea, when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, a man in a navy blazer stood on the porch, holding a clipboard and a polite smile. "Mrs. Walker?" he asked. "Yes," I said, tightening my robe. "I'm just here to confirm a few property details for the upcoming listing." I blinked. "Listing? What listing?" He glanced at the papers. "The sale of the property 122, Shoreline Drive?" For a moment, I thought he had the wrong house. "Sir, this house isn't for sale." His polite smile faltered. "Oh, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. I was told by the realtor that your daughter is handling the process." Teresa Simmons. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I felt my heart skip. "My daughter?" I whispered. He nodded quickly, sensing my confusion. "Yes, ma'am. She's listed as your power of attorney. Said you weren't feeling well and asked her to manage the sale." My throat tightened. The tea in my stomach turned sour. I could barely breathe as I told him to leave, as calmly as I could manage. When he was gone, I shut the door, pressed my back against it, and just stood there in silence. The sound of the rain against the glass was the only thing keeping me grounded. Teresa had power of attorney, but only for emergencies, only to help pay bills if I were sick. She had no right to sell my home. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up, her voice light and casual. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay?" "Teresa," I said slowly, trying to steady my tone. "A man came by. Said he's here about listing my house for sale. Do you know anything about that?" There was a pause, just a second too long. Then she laughed. "Oh, Mom, don't worry. That's just part of a refinance process. Daniel's helping you restructure the property value so you can save on taxes." "Refinance?" I repeated, suspicion curling in my gut. "Yes, Mom. Trust me, it's all legal. You'll thank me later." Something about her voice didn't sit right. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. But I told myself I was overreacting. She was my daughter. She'd never hurt me. I spent that night tossing and turning, listening to the rain and wondering why my own child's words suddenly sounded like a stranger's. A week passed. No more men with clipboards, no strange calls. I started to think maybe I had misunderstood, that perhaps it really was just paperwork. Then the mail arrived. Among the usual stack of bills and magazines was a thick white envelope with a gold letterhead, Harbor Realty Group. My heart sank. I opened it, and there it was, the listing agreement. My signature, neatly printed at the bottom. But I hadn't signed it. The ink looked perfect, my name beautifully forged in a way that almost fooled me. Almost. I sat at my kitchen table for nearly an hour just staring at it, the words blurring through my tears. For a long time, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to drive straight to her house and demand answers. But another part of me, the tired, old, motherly part, hoped there was still a reasonable explanation. Maybe Daniel had misunderstood something. Maybe she'd fix it once she realized how wrong it was. That night, I picked up the phone again. "Teresa," I said, my voice trembling. "I got a letter. From the Realty Group. It says my house is listed for sale, and it has my signature on it." She exhaled sharply. "Mom, I told you, it's a paperwork thing. Don't get yourself worked up." "Don't get worked up?" I whispered. "You forged my name, Teresa. You signed my life away." "Mom, calm down," she said, her tone suddenly cold. "Daniel said this was the best move for everyone. You're living alone in a house that's too big. You need care, structure. We're trying to help you." By stealing from me? There was silence. The kind that says everything words won't. Then, quietly, she said, "You're being dramatic. It's already done. Already done." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair by the window, watching the dark ocean crash against the shore. I thought about all the years I'd spent building a home, not just with money, but with love, every memory now reduced to a transaction. The papers sat on my table, the fake signature mocking me in the dim light. Something inside me shifted that night. Not anger, not yet. Something deeper, a quiet realization that my daughter no longer saw me as a mother, but as property. The next morning, I packed a small bag and drove into town. I went straight to the county records office, my hands trembling as I spoke to the clerk. "Ma'am," she said gently after checking the system, "it looks like the deed was transferred last week. The property is under Teresa Simmons' name now." My vision blurred. How is that possible? She looked at me with sympathetic eyes. "It says here the transfer was made under power of attorney, notarized and filed." I stood there, gripping the counter, my heart pounding in my chest. The world I'd built, the life I'd preserved, had been sold out from under me by the very person I loved most. I walked out into the sunlight, but everything felt cold. That was the day I decided I wouldn't stay silent. If my daughter thought I would quietly hand over my dignity, she was about to learn a mother's strength doesn't fade with age. It hardens. I sat in my car for a long time that morning, parked by the courthouse steps, staring out at the gray clouds gathering over the ocean. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, but inside, something had gone still, a kind of quiet resolve I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had been betrayed, and I was done being quiet about it. The first thing I did was call my old friend, Margaret. We'd taught together at the elementary school years ago before I retired. Margaret's husband, Charles, was an attorney, one of those calm, methodical men who didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened. "Margaret," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need help. Legal help." Within an hour, I was sitting in Charles's small office above the bakery on Main Street. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted up through the vents, strangely comforting for what was about to come. Charles listened without interrupting as I told him everything, the forged signature, the transfer, the lies. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers under his chin. "Mrs. Walker," he said quietly, "what your daughter did is fraud. Serious fraud." I swallowed hard. "Can I get my house back?" He paused. "Maybe. But we'll need proof, documents, witness statements, anything that shows you never gave consent." "I still have the original copy of the power of attorney," I said. "It was only for financial emergencies, not property sales." He nodded slowly. "That'll help. And we'll need to act fast before the sale closes." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Charles made a few calls right then and there, one to a notary, another to a property investigator. The words temporary injunction floated through the air like lifelines I was trying to grab onto. By the time I left his office, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was angry and focused. When I got home that evening, the answering machine light was blinking. Teresa's voice filled the room. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be," she said, her tone clipped. "Daniel and I have already arranged for you to move into a care villa near us. It's beautiful. They have a garden. You'll love it. The house is sold. It's for the best." I pressed delete before she could finish. For the first time, I didn't cry. I walked through the house, touching the things I loved, the old piano by the window, the seashells I'd collected with Teresa when she was 10, the faded photo of her holding her first surfboard. I wondered what had happened to that little girl who used to bring me dandelions and whisper, "You're my best friend, Mom." How had we gotten here? I didn't have an answer. 2 days later, I met with the county investigator Charles had hired. Her name was Elaine, sharp, direct, with eyes that missed nothing. She examined the forged paperwork, comparing the signatures. "It's clean work," she said, "but I've seen better forgeries." The notary stamp was copied from an old document. That alone makes it invalid. She smiled faintly. "Your daughter and son-in-law weren't as clever as they thought." She handed me her report, neat, official, powerful. The kind of truth you could hold in your hand. That night, Charles filed the emergency injunction to halt the sale. By morning, the property was frozen. The title could not be transferred again until the case was reviewed. When Teresa found out, She called me. Her voice trembled with anger. Mom, what did you do? I did what you should have done, I said evenly. I told the truth. You're ruining everything. Daniel's investment depends on that sale. So that's what this was about, I said quietly. Not about my well-being. About money. She went silent. Mom, she said finally, her voice small now. You don't understand. Daniel, he's in trouble. Business trouble. We needed the cash. I thought. You thought you could steal from me and call it love. I finished for her. She didn't answer. I ended the call. For a long while after, I just sat at the kitchen table, watching the sunlight fade across the tile. There was a sadness I couldn't shake, not for the house, but for the daughter I had lost long before she took my home. The court hearing came faster than I expected. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting, no tears. Just paperwork, questions, signatures, and the soft echo of my footsteps on the marble floor. Teresa sat across the room from me, eyes red, Daniel whispering beside her. She wouldn't look at me. When the judge asked if I had given permission to sell my property, I said firmly, no, Your Honor. When he asked if I wished to revoke the power of attorney, I said yes. Immediately. It took less than an hour. The forged sale was declared void. Ownership reverted to me. Just like that, the beach house was mine again. But as I walked out of that courtroom, I didn't feel victorious. Only tired. Because no ruling could restore what had been lost between a mother and her child. That evening, I returned to my beach house. The tide was low, and the sea stretched out in soft, endless gray. I stood on the porch, breathing in the salty air, feeling the wood beneath my bare feet. For the first time in weeks, it was quiet. Peaceful. I should have felt relief. But all I felt was grief, a quiet, steady ache for the daughter I'd once known. Inside, the phone rang again. This time, I let it ring. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. Because forgiveness, I realized, wasn't something you gave in a single breath. It was something you earned, one truth at a time. And Teresa had a long way to go. It didn't take long for word to spread. In a small coastal town like ours, news traveled faster than the tide. The story of what Teresa and Daniel had done, the forged papers, the blocked sale, the court ruling became the quiet talk in every grocery line, church pew, and beauty salon chair. No one said anything cruel to my face, but I could feel it in the air. The pity, the disbelief, the questions people didn't dare to ask aloud. Did you hear? Her own daughter tried to sell her house. No, Lord, not Teresa. She was always such a sweet girl. Sweet girls can turn hard, I thought, when life hands them the wrong kind of love. A week after the hearing, I went back to church for the first time in months. I almost didn't go. I was tired, emotionally wrung out, but something in me needed to sit in that old wooden pew and hear a little truth that didn't come from lawyers or judges. When I walked in, heads turned. Sister Evelyn squeezed my hand, her eyes full of something between sorrow and admiration. Child, she whispered, you've been through the storm. I nodded softly. And I'm still standing. Pastor Green's sermon that day was about job, about losing everything and finding faith again through the ashes. He said something I'll never forget. Sometimes, God lets the storm tear down what we built, so he can show us what was never solid to begin with. Those words sat heavy on my heart. Because the truth was, I'd built my whole world around my daughter, her happiness, her future, her approval. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking if she ever valued me beyond what I could give. That night, I went home and wrote Teresa a letter. Not a long one. Just a few lines. I still love you. But love isn't blind anymore. I will always be your mother, but I can no longer protect you from the consequences of your choices. I didn't send it. Not yet. I folded it neatly and placed it inside the family Bible, between Psalms and Proverbs. I figured when I was ready, she'd get her answer, in words or in silence. The next week, Margaret stopped by. She brought peach cobbler, the kind with the buttery crust that melts on your tongue. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, Teresa came by the store today. She looked awful thin, pale, just lost. She said Daniel left town. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to feel anything, but my heart still clenched. Margaret sighed. She said she didn't know where to go. That she made a mistake. I didn't respond. I just traced the edge of my teacup with my thumb, watching the steam curl in the air. "She's still your daughter," Margaret said gently. "I know," I whispered. "That's the hardest part." That night, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Teresa stood there, rain-soaked, trembling, clutching a duffel bag to her chest. Her eyes were swollen, her hair a mess. For the first time since she was a teenager, she looked small. "Mom," she said softly. I didn't say a word. I just stepped aside. She walked in, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. For a long time, we stood in silence. The only sound was the rain against the windows and the slow tick of the grandfather clock. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness," she said. "I came because I don't have anywhere else to go." Her voice cracked on the last word, and something in me broke all over again. I motioned toward the couch. "Sit down." She did, hands folded in her lap like a child waiting for scolding. "I know I hurt you," she whispered. I thought I could fix everything for us. Daniel said it was temporary, that he'd buy the house back once the business turned around. I was stupid. I wanted him to see me as strong. I swallowed hard. "And you thought taking from me would make you strong?" She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "No. I thought it would make me enough." That word, enough, hit me like a wave. Because I had spent her entire life trying to make her feel like she was enough, and yet somehow, she had never learned it for herself. We sat there for a long time, two broken women bound by love and regret. Finally, I stood and went to the kitchen. I poured her a cup of tea, just the way she liked it, a little honey, no sugar. When I set it in front of her, she looked up, surprised. "I didn't say I forgave you," I said softly. "I know," she whispered. "But I can't let you sit out there in the rain." Her shoulders shook as she cried, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet sobs that come from deep inside. I sat beside her, staring out the window at the storm. For the first time in a long time, I realized forgiveness wasn't always a decision. Sometimes it was a slow, aching process, a choice you had to make again every morning until your heart stopped hurting. The next day, Teresa packed up her things. She didn't ask to stay. She just said she needed to figure out who she was without Daniel. Before she left, she turned to me. "I'll pay you back someday, Mom. I don't know how, but I will." I smiled sadly. "Just live right, baby. That'll be enough." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I love you." "I love you too," I said. "Always have. Always will." And then she was gone, walking down the porch steps, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, the morning sun catching the damp edges of her hair. I stood there watching her go, the ocean wind carrying the faint sound of waves against the sand. I didn't know if she'd come back. But for the first time, that thought didn't scare me. Because sometimes, the best kind of love isn't the one that holds on, it's the one that finally lets go. It's been a year since that night, the one when Teresa showed up at my door, soaked to the bone and shaking like a leaf. Sometimes, I still wake up to the sound of rain, thinking I'll see her silhouette standing there again. But when I open my eyes, it's just the quiet hum of my house by the sea, steady, peaceful, and finally, my own again. After everything, I decided not to sell the beach house. I could have taken the court's compensation and downsized to a small apartment in town, but something in me couldn't let go of this place. Too many memories lived in these walls, some painful, yes, but many sweet. The creak in the floorboard by the kitchen still reminds me of Teresa's tiny feet running across it when she was a child. The faint scent of salt and old wood in the mornings carries me back to summers when we'd bake blueberry muffins and laugh until our sides hurt. I couldn't erase all that. And maybe I didn't want to. The first few months were hard. The silence was heavy, like the air after a storm when you're not sure if it's really over. There were days when I caught myself setting out 2 plates instead of 1. Nights when I'd hear a car pull up outside and my heart would leap, only to realize it wasn't her. But healing doesn't come in one grand moment. It comes in small, quiet ways. Like the first time I walked along the beach again, the same stretch where I'd once taught Teresa how to skip stones. The waves rolled in, steady and sure, and I felt something loosen inside me. The second time was when I planted new flowers by the porch, marigolds, her favorite. Their bright orange petals caught the sunlight and made the house feel alive again. And the third was when I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. It was over something silly, Margaret trying to teach me how to use that new phone app, Face Something or Bookface, I can't remember. But it felt good, like breathing after holding my breath for too long. One evening, while I was watering the plants, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Teresa. It said simply, "Mom, I got a job. Small apartment by the city. I'm okay. I hope you are too." I stared at those words for a long time. They weren't an apology, but they were something more, a bridge, maybe. I typed back, "I'm proud of you, baby. Take care of yourself." And that was it. No long paragraphs. No guilt. Just two women, a mother and daughter, learning how to love each other from a distance. The months turned into seasons. The house became my sanctuary again. I started painting, something I hadn't done since Teresa was born. Just little coastal landscapes at first, then portraits of faces I imagined. Women like me, older, wiser, weathered, but strong. Margaret said I should sell them at the local art fair. I laughed at her at first, but I did it. And to my surprise, people bought them. Not because they were perfect, but because they felt something. A woman came up to me once, holding one of my pieces, a painting of a mother standing by the sea, her face half turned toward the light. She said, "There's peace in her eyes. But it looks like she's been through a lot." I smiled softly and told her she has. "But she's still standing." The woman nodded, eyes glistening. "Then she reminds me of my mama." I think that's when I realized pain has a way of connecting us, even when it comes wrapped in different stories. About 6 months later, Teresa came to visit. Not unannounced this time. She called ahead, her voice small but steady. "Would it be okay if I stopped by this weekend?" I took a breath before answering. "Yes, baby." It would. When she arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked grown. Not just older, grown. Her eyes had that softness people get when life has humbled them a little. We sat on the porch, sipping tea, watching the waves. There were no dramatic tears or big speeches, just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels safe again. After a long pause, she said, "I think I understand now." "Understand what?" I asked. "Why you canceled the funding. Why you stopped helping." I used to think it was punishment, but now I know it was love. The kind that doesn't enable, but teaches. I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. "It broke my heart to do it," I whispered. "But sometimes love has to break your heart before it can save your soul." She nodded. "I'm sorry, Mama." Those 3 words. I'd imagined them 1,000 times. But hearing them out loud felt like a balm I didn't know I still needed. I reached over and took her hand. "You were never a bad person, Teresa. Just a hurting one. And hurting people hurt others sometimes." She cried then, quietly, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the water gold. And in that moment, the years of tension, the betrayal, the distance, it all melted away. That night, after she left, I walked down to the shore barefoot. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the tide brushing gently at my ankles. I whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for the pain, but for the lessons it brought. For the strength I found in loss. For the peace that followed the storm. Because I'd learned something through it all. Love doesn't die when it's betrayed. It transforms. It matures. It becomes something quieter, wiser, more resilient. And sometimes, it finds its way back not to what it was, but to what it was always meant to be. Sometimes, life teaches us that love isn't about how much you give, but how much you're willing to let go. When Teresa told me she'd sold my beach house, I thought I'd lost everything: my home, my memories, even my daughter. But what I really lost that day was the illusion that love could survive without boundaries. You see, real love, the kind that lasts through storms and silence, needs truth to keep it alive. And truth doesn't always sound gentle. Sometimes it sounds like no. Like, no more funding. Like, no more lies. Like, no more being taken for granted. It took me a lifetime to learn that saying no to someone you love isn't cruelty, it's courage. And in that courage, There's a quiet kind of love. The kind that says, I believe in you enough to let you fall, and trust you'll rise again. When my daughter came back, not as the girl who blamed me, but as the woman who understood me, I realized something else. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from the weight of what was, so you can finally stand in the light of what is. Now, when I sit on that porch and watch the waves roll in, I think about all the mothers who've been hurt by their own children's words, and all the daughters who one day realize what those words cost. If that's you, I want you to remember this. You are not weak for walking away. You are not heartless for setting boundaries. And you are never too late to find peace again. Because love, real love, has a way of returning when it's met with grace. Would you have done what I did? Would you have walked away to protect your peace, or stayed to protect your child? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe for more stories like mine, because sometimes healing begins when we share the truth.